before her name was whispered in victory songs, before her hands were remembered as brave. Her name was Jael. It meant mountain goat in Hebrew, a creature that climbed impossible heights, that survived in harsh terrain where others couldn't. She didn't know it yet, but her name would become a prophecy. She was a Kenite woman, born into a tribe of metalworkers and wanderers. The Kenite were descendants of Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, a people who had once walked alongside Israel in the wilderness. They were neither Israelite nor Canaanite, but something in between, nomads who pitched their tents wherever they could find peace, who tried to stay neutral in a land that knew nothing but war. Jael had married Heber the Kenite, and together they had separated from the rest of their clan. They had moved north, away from the Negev where their people usually dwelt, and pitched their tents near Kadesh in Naphtali. It was a calculated decision. Heber had made peace with King Jabin of Canaan and his brutal general, Sisera. Peace meant survival. Peace meant their family wouldn't be caught in the crossfire of endless battles between Israel and their oppressors. But peace came at a cost. Jael watched from her tent as Sisera's armies moved through the land like locusts, crushing everything in their path. For 20 years, Israel had suffered under Jabin's iron fist. 20 years of cruelty. 20 years of 900 iron chariots rolling through villages, leaving nothing but ash and grief. 20 years of mothers weeping for children who would never come home. And for 20 years, God had been silent. Jael heard the stories. The Israelites cried out to their God, the one who had once parted seas and toppled walls. But the heavens seemed closed. The miracles had stopped. Where was the God of Abraham now? Where was the God who had promised to never leave them? The silence was deafening. In that silence, a woman rose. Her name was Deborah, a prophetess who judged Israel from beneath a palm tree in the hill country of Ephraim. People came to her with their disputes, their pain, their questions. And somehow, in the midst of God's silence, Deborah still heard his voice. One day, Deborah summoned a man named Barak. He was a military commander from Kadesh, not far from where Jael's tent stood. Deborah's message was clear, direct, impossible. The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands. Judges 4 verses 6-7. Barak looked at this prophetess, this woman speaking with the authority of heaven, and fear gripped his heart. If you go with me, I will go, he said. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. Judges 4 verse 8. Deborah agreed, but her words carried a sting. Because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Judges 4 verse 9. No one, not Barak, not Deborah, certainly not Jael herself, knew which woman God meant. Jael went about her daily tasks. She drew water. She tended the fire. She wove fabric and prepared meals. Life in a tent was simple, rhythmic, predictable. Her husband maintained his careful neutrality, his political alliances. They were safe. They had chosen safety. But inside Jael's chest, something was stirring. Something restless. Something she couldn't name. She had heard the cries of Israelite women. She had seen children orphaned by Sisera's cruelty. She knew the stories of her own ancestors, how they had walked with Moses, how they had witnessed the glory of God in the wilderness. That glory felt like a distant memory now, a fairy tale told by old men around dying fires. Where was God in all this suffering? Why didn't he move? Why didn't he speak? Why didn't he save? The questions burned in her like coals. Then one day, everything changed. The word spread like wildfire. Barak had gathered his army. 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun had assembled at Mount Tabor. Sisera had responded with overwhelming force, 900 iron chariots and all his troops. It was going to be a massacre. Israel didn't stand a chance. But Deborah had spoken a word, go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? Judges 4 verse 14. What happened next would be told and retold for generations. As Sisera's chariots rumbled toward the Kishon River, the sky opened. Rain poured down in torrents, not gentle rain, but violent, flooding rain. The Kishon River, usually a lazy stream, became a raging monster. The iron chariots, those symbols of invincible power, became death traps, stuck in the mud, useless as toys. God had broken his silence with thunder. Barak's men charged down from Mount Tabor, and Sisera's army fell apart. The commander who had terrorized Israel for 20 years watched his forces crumble. His chariots betrayed him. His soldiers fled. And in that moment, the mighty Sisera did something unthinkable. He ran. The great general abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. His army was destroyed, his reputation shattered, his life hanging by a thread. He ran north, desperately seeking refuge, and his feet carried him to a place he thought was safe. The tent of Heber the Kenite. The tent of his ally. The tent where Jael waited. She saw him coming. Exhausted. Desperate. Covered in mud and defeat. For 20 years, this man had been the face of Israel's nightmare. For 20 years, he had operated with impunity, crushing anyone who opposed him. And now he stood before her tent, gasping for breath, looking over his shoulder for pursuers. Everything in Jael's life had led to this moment. Every prayer she'd heard unanswered. Every cry for justice that seemed to fall on deaf ears. Every time she'd wondered where God was, why he allowed evil to thrive, why he stayed silent while the innocent suffered. She had a choice. She could turn him away. She could let him run past. She could maintain her husband's careful neutrality, his political peace. It was safer that way. Wiser. More sensible. Or she could do something else. Something dangerous. Something that required a kind of faith she wasn't sure she had. Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid, she called to him. Judges 4 verse 18. Sisera entered, and she covered him with a blanket. He was shaking, not just from exhaustion, but from fear. The hunter had become the hunted. I'm thirsty, he said. Please give me some water. Judges 4 verse 19. She opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink. She covered him again. Stand in the doorway of the tent, he commanded, falling back into his habit of authority. If someone comes by and asks you, is anyone in there? Say, no. Judges 4 verse 20. He lay down. The adrenaline drained away. His eyes grew heavy. The mighty Sisera, who had made thousands tremble, let his guard down in the tent of a woman he thought he could trust. He fell asleep. And Jael stood there, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She looked at this man, this monster who had caused so much pain. She thought of the mothers who had buried children because of him. She thought of the 20 years of suffering. She thought of God's long silence and his sudden, thunderous intervention at the Kishon River. God had moved. After 20 years, he had moved. He had broken the chariots. He had scattered the army. He had brought this man, this tyrant, to her tent. Was this why? Was this the moment? Her eyes fell on a tent peg. She picked it up. She picked up a hammer. Everything in her life had been about survival, about safety, about staying out of trouble. But standing there, holding implements of her daily life, Jael understood something. God wasn't asking her to be safe. He was asking her to be brave. Her hands steadied. She approached Sisera quietly. He was deep asleep, vulnerable, unaware. She raised the tent peg and the hammer. And she drove the peg through his temple, straight into the ground. Judges 4 verse 21. It was over in seconds. The man who had terrorized a nation for 2 decades died in a woman's tent, killed by a woman's hand, using the tools of domestic life. Jael stepped back, breathing hard, staring at what she'd done. She had just killed Sisera. She had just altered the course of history. She, a Kenite woman, a nomad's wife, someone who was supposed to stay neutral, had taken a side. She had chosen Israel's God. Moments later, Barak arrived, hunting for Sisera. Jael went out to meet him. No hesitation. No fear. Come, she said. I will show you the man you're looking for. Judges 4 verse 22. Barak entered the tent and saw what she had done. The prophecy was fulfilled. The honor had gone not to him, but to a woman. Not even an Israelite woman, but a Kenite. An outsider. Someone no one expected. Because that's how God works. He uses the unlikely. He chooses the overlooked. He moves in ways that make people stop and realize, this wasn't human cleverness. This was divine intervention. When Deborah sang of that day, she sang of Jael. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles she brought him curdled milk. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head, she shattered and pierced his temple. Judges 5 verses 24 to 26. Jael became a hero. Her name was sung in Israel. The woman who saved a nation. The woman who ended 20 years of oppression with a single, courageous act. But here's what we need to understand about Jael's story. It's not really about Jael's bravery. It's about God's faithfulness. For 20 years, it seemed like God had forgotten Israel. For 20 years, prayers seemed to bounce off closed heavens. For 20 years, evil prospered and the righteous suffered. Where was God? He was there. He was always there. Working in ways no one could see. Positioning people. Preparing hearts. Moving pieces into place. He was raising up a prophetess named Deborah. He was preparing a commander named Barak. He was watching a woman named Jael, a woman no one thought mattered, a woman outside the covenant, a woman living in a tent in the middle of nowhere. God was waiting for the right moment. Not silent. Never silent. Just waiting. And when that moment came, he moved with devastating power. He flooded rivers. He destroyed armies. He brought the enemy to the tent of an unexpected hero. Jael's story asks us a question. What will you do with the moment God gives you? Maybe you've been waiting. Maybe you've been praying for years and hearing nothing. Maybe you've wondered if God sees your pain, your struggle, your situation. Maybe you've felt overlooked, unimportant, like someone who doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Jael felt that way too. And then God showed up at her tent door. When he did, she had to make a choice. Safety or courage. Neutrality or action. The easy path or the righteous one. She chose courage. She chose action. She chose to believe that God had brought Sisera to her tent for a reason, and she had the faith to act on that belief, even when it was terrifying, even when it cost her everything, even when she didn't know how it would end. That's what faith looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Not perfect understanding, but trust that God's timing is perfect even when we can't see it. Jael reminds us that God uses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. You don't have to be a prophet like Deborah. You don't have to be a commander like Barak. You don't even have to be part of the right group or have the right background. You just have to be willing. You just have to be ready. You just have to say yes when God shows up at your door. Because here's the truth, God is still moving. Even in silence. Even in waiting. Even when it feels like nothing is happening. He's working behind the scenes. He's positioning you. He's preparing you for a moment you don't even know is coming. And when that moment arrives, when the opportunity appears at your tent door, will you have the courage to pick up what's in your hand and use it for his glory? Jael did. A tent peg and a hammer. The tools of her everyday life. Nothing special. Nothing powerful. Until God used them to change everything. Your moment is coming. Maybe it's already here. Don't let fear keep you in the tent. Don't let doubt convince you that you're not the right person. Don't let waiting turn into passivity. God didn't give the honor to the experienced general. He gave it to the woman in the tent who was willing to act when the moment came. He's still doing that today. He's still looking for people who will trust him in the waiting and move with him in the moment. Be like Jael. Be ready. Be willing. Be brave. Because God is not silent. He's speaking. And he's about to use you in ways you never imagined. The woman who saved Israel started as just a woman in a tent. But when God moved, she moved with him. And everything changed.